Okay. So welcome to the CERP REU Site Evaluation Forum. We are excited to have you here, and we're looking forward to getting into this discussion. Okay, so before we get started, just want to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded, and this purpose is so that we can give you a copy of the meeting afterwards, and also share it with PIs who weren't able to join us today. But it's not going to be shared widely beyond the PIs for REU sites and just within the CERP team. So please keep your audio on mute unless you're speaking. I think this is something that we all know with Zoom calls. But at the same time, we have a Google Doc agenda that you can insert your comments or thoughts as we go along. If you haven't accessed that agenda, it was in your email. You can also see it in the chat. Tonight will be inserting that as we go along. Okay, so here's just a brief outline of the call. So we're going to introduce CERP and the evaluation team. I'm also going to provide an overview of our evaluation plans, our measures, as well as our deliverables. So what kind of report are you going to get? At that point, we'll move into a facilitated discussion where we'll ask you some questions to get a better understanding of your experiences as a PI leading an REU, and also what you're hoping to see out of this work. And then finally, we'll try to leave some time for a wrap up where we can address some lingering questions. Okay, so let's start with what is CERP. Many of you may already be familiar with us, but just to make sure we're all on the same page. So CERP stands for the Center for Evaluating the Research Pipeline. We are the research and evaluation arm of the CRA. We are known for our Data Buddies project. This is our flagship project that is a survey. So it's annual and it's national level, and it collects data from individuals in computing. And our large samples come from students, so those in undergraduate and graduate programs, and this is largely by design, but we also have the ability to collect data from people as they graduate from programs and go into the workforce. And just a reminder to use mute for the meeting just in case we have any overlaps. Okay, and then so also using this infrastructure for Data Buddies, we have the ability to collect large-scale data with systematic reporting. And this data can also be collected longitudinally, and we've been doing that since 2013. And then we also use this infrastructure to do comparative program evaluation. So when we're evaluating a program, for instance, an REU program, we can use Data Buddies data to compare that your program participants to participants in other research experiences or alternative opportunities. So I just want to introduce the evaluation team for this work. My name is Heather Wright, and I'm the Associate Director of CERP and the Project Manager for this evaluation work. Borchen Tamer is the Director of CERP and kind of oversees our contract that we have with NSF. I'm joined today by my colleagues Christy Kelly and Tanaya, and Christy will be leading the facilitated discussion later, so you'll hear a little bit more from her. And Tanaya is hosting this meeting. She'll be posting into the chat the link, as I've mentioned already. You've probably already seen some emails from her, so she's doing a lot of the communication. So you'll continue to see her name and all of our other names as we move along. And just want to note that this is a subset of the CERP team, especially if you're already familiar with our work, so you may know some of our other colleagues, but this is specific to the evaluation work. Okay, so at this point, I want to dig in a little bit more to the evaluation, and we'll start off by providing a little bit of background and context for CERP's role and how we got involved with this, and then we'll move into the goals. So for starting with the background, broadening participation in computing and addressing the underrepresentation of certain group identities within the field has been a national priority for years. I don't think this is anything unique to this group. I think we all know this, but this is coupled with the drive to increase the production of domestic computing PhDs and those pursuing research careers. The academic literature indicates that research experiences are important in encouraging students towards research careers and help retaining them in the field. But we have less information that's specific to the impact of the NSF REU programs at a large scale programmatic perspective. So that's where CERP comes in. So we were contracted by NSF to conduct program evaluation for their REU programs and working towards this goal. So specifically towards the REU sites, we hope to understand the impact of your REU site on student outcomes, such as their scientific knowledge and their educational and career aspirations. To do this, we'll be harnessing our existing data infrastructure for systematic data collection and evaluation. This data infrastructure will also enable us to do some comparative evaluation for you, all working towards the goal of providing you with more information about your REU site. So we're taking this beyond just feedback about students' experiences in the program and giving you information about the impact of the program over time, as well as from a comparative standpoint. And of course, we also intend to provide more information to NSF about their programs and how their funding is being used, and then also information to the broader computing community about our lessons learned. So next, we should talk about the evaluation plan for your REU site. The idea is that this will be implemented next summer, and that's because we have some logistics that have to be sorted out prior to the start of this work. But once we get started, this is the process that it will look like. So prior to your REU, we anticipate early spring, but with your feedback, we will adjust that timeline. We will reach out to you about surveying your students for the evaluation. So making sure we're on the same page of what that'll look like. And to get any information about your REU site that might help us understand what will happen over the summer and how we can better have comparison groups, within REU sites. So this might look like, how many students are you planning to have this summer? Are you planning any seminars on a certain topic? Our intention is that when we ask you these questions, you'll have the ability to answer them with ease or little planning in advance. And we'll rely on your feedback. If it's not feasible to give us that information at the time, then we can give it to you. We can ask a little bit later. So once it's time to start, we will be sending you a survey link to a pre-programmed survey. And then you will be distributing that to your REU students. This helps minimize some of the back and forth between trying to get us contact lists for students, than us emailing them directly, and they may not know who we are. So we will rely on you to include the survey link in your normal communications with your students. Near the end of the summer, we will do the same structure. So it'll give you a post-program survey, and this will have similar measures to what we've provided on the pre-program survey, but then it'll also collect some feedback about the experience so that you still understand if students had any feedback specific to what happened over the summer. And then once that wraps up, we will be providing you with an evaluation report. We anticipate that to come out during the fall. It's possible that we'll need to push that back to early winter, just for some of this startup of getting the scripts ready for the report. But then that would be quicker as we move along in the years. And I'll also give a little bit more details in another slide about what that evaluation report would look like. But this is kind of the overall structure for how the evaluation would work for your REU site. Okay, so now I want to briefly overview some of our anticipated measures that we'll use for understanding impact. I just want to note that these aren't exhaustive, and these also are not going to list the characteristic type of information that we'll ask students, such as their computing background or their demographics. So all of that will still be asked in the surveys that we collect, but I wanted to focus on the ones that we will be using to kind of understand impact. So some of the items we'll use will focus on students' research skills and knowledge. So where do they come in before the program, and what skill sets do they develop over the summer? We will also collect information about their perceptions of graduate school. Do they know what the process looks like? As well as, are they interested in going to graduate school? So that relates to those educational and career aspirations. So what do they intend to do? Do they want to go into graduate school? Are they thinking about going into industry? So what does that look like? Then we'll also be collecting information about their computing self-efficacy, so their confidence to be successful in computing, as well as their scientific identification and leadership skills. So do they identify as a scientist? What is their perception of their ability to be a leader as a scientist? We'll also collect their sense of belonging to the field and in computing. Their access to social support structures. So do they have peers that they can interact with? Do they feel like they have access to mentors? What is the development of their professional network look like? Do they think that they have people that they could go to in the future to discuss their graduate school opportunities or anything that they need help with? So what's that professional network look like? So again, these are not exhaustive, but this gives you a flavor for the things that we're planning for. And so we're really interested in understanding if this aligns with what you value, and understanding if your program is making an impact or not. So we'll try to get into that a little bit more in the facilitated discussion. Okay, so one of the things that might be really important is your report. So the report that you're going to receive sometime after we finish data collection will, one, include that summary of participants that I mentioned. We'll be collecting all different types of demographic information, such as race, their gender, disability status. We have a large number of demographics that we like to collect, and we can look at that in an intersectional perspective if the incisors allow. So we'll provide that summary, and that'll be a chapter for you. Then we'll also have another chapter that includes pre-post comparisons alongside comparisons of other similar REU sites with their pre-post comparisons. In this table, this is just an example of what what it might look like for you to receive. So on the one side for your REU site, you see your before REU mean scores and your after REU mean scores. So this is showing your specific site over time. And this is just an example with mentorship support. It's all fake data. And this is alongside similar REU sites. So this is where that pre-program questionnaire will be really beneficial, so that we can make sure that the group that we call for this similar REU site group is relevant to your REU site and student perspectives. There are other ways that we can work around this if you're not able to give us this information, but we're hoping that by getting that information from you, we can give you a fair comparison, so you don't feel like we're comparing apples to oranges in this situation. So this is an example of the report, and again, this is all just fake data. Okay, and then I want to wrap up my portion of this talk by just giving you a flavor of other things that we're doing at CERP with our contract. And it's outside of your specific site evaluation, but it could impact your or involve you as a REU site PI. But this is just to kind of give you an understanding and be open about the work that we're doing. So alongside providing you with more information, we also are providing NSF with information. So we'll be producing an annual report to NSF on REU sites. So this will be at an aggregate level, just to show overall pre-post comparisons of all the sites and student responses. We'll be integrating some predictors of student success in there just to kind of get at understanding the impact. Another thing that we're going to be doing as part of our evaluation work is to collect follow-up data. So approximately 1 year, we plan to follow up with all REU students as part of this work. We'll collect similar measures used during the pre-post program evaluation, and we will see if there are any sustained impacts of participating in an REU. And that will include some comparative touch points as well. So again, using that Data Buddies infrastructure, we'll be able to compare the NSF REU students to students in other types of research opportunities or alternatives, such as internships. Finally, we're going to be also doing this work with REU supplements. I realize that some of you may have an REU supplement. The plan is to have a meeting just like this one with REU supplement PIs, and the details of what that evaluation will look like is more to be determined based on the discussions that we have, just to make sure that we can serve the supplements in a way that makes sense, given that there's a lot of variability in how they operate. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Christy, who will first go over a little bit of logistics and then dig us into the facilitated discussion. Once she does her overview, I'll stop sharing the slides so that we can all have a more productive conversation.
Hey, thank you, Heather. So one of our goals today is to get your insights about what you've been seeing in your REU sites. From the registration form information that you all completed, it appears that many, if not most of you, have been involved with REU sites for a year and some of you for many years. And this is the point where we'd really like to hear from you. We want to learn more about your previous experiences and evaluation efforts, and this will help us make sure we are supporting your evaluation needs. In the next slide, I'm going to share with you a set of 3 questions that we would love to start getting your feedback on here. We will have a discussion on each question individually over the next 30 minutes or so, depending upon how much there is to share. We encourage everyone to take part in this conversation, but also if you do not feel comfortable joining in the Zoom conversation, we have some options for you. You have the agenda that's been shared that you can make notations in, or you can contact the CERP team separately as well if you'd like to share things privately. So with that, you can see there, we have an overview of what we're going to be seeking your input on today. We'll be talking about NSF REU impacts. We will be getting your thoughts about measurement and how that's been going for those of you who've been doing some measurement of your REU sites. And then we will wrap up with input you might have about things you're interested in that might not have been mentioned or that would be helpful to you as it relates to evaluation. Okay, so I would like to start our conversation today, and you can stop sharing. Thanks, Heather. I'd like to start with talking about the impact of size REU experiences. And so I'd invite all of you to share with us, based on your experiences or any evaluation you've done at your sites, what do you think are the biggest impacts that you're seeing of the NSF REU experience? And this can be for students, graduate level advisors and mentors, or faculty advisors. So I'm going to open it up and invite you to share.
This is Lisa Massey with the University of Central Florida. I'm a program evaluator for the REU Site and Internet of Things with Dr. Turgut, the PI, who's here on the call. So we've been using Audrey's REU, those who are familiar with her toolkit, and it's been very useful. Primarily though, the pre-post test statistical significances are really have been found in research skills, you know, that as expected, and self-efficacy. I think those are mainly the ones that have shown any statistical significance pre-post that I can recall off the top of my head. Occasionally they may have another, you know, another construct that does show that, but that's it. And she does change up the construct sometimes also.
Thank you, Lisa. Anybody else want to add on to that or talk about other things that you're seeing?
Oh, I did want to say that she did add some questions on a sense of belonging. I think that I don't think that she had in the beginning, but it's fairly recent. And her latest report for 2020, there is a statistically significant difference for that also, as well as attitude for this cycle in those four areas.
That's really helpful to hear your perspective on this. And one thing that I failed to mention earlier on is that we're working with Audrey during this evaluation contract. So she's a consultant with us so that we can kind of sync up with some of the measures that she's been finding over the years that she's been doing the work. And I know she's also on the call. So Audrey, you know, feel free to chime in as you see fit for this conversation.
Hi, everybody. I'll just add that the constructs are very similar across what we have been calling the a la carte survey for what the CERP survey is going to be measuring, because these are known in the literature to be predictors of persistence and retention success for students. And so I think the constructs are more important than the item by item that might be asked. And so you'll be receiving the same kinds of information about what we're measuring. So that's not going to change. And sense of belonging, you're right, that was added. I piloted it 2 years ago, and then we added it last year specifically to look at what was going on with students who were in the virtual experience. So, I mean, that is a real critical factor that I'm glad is going to continue to be observed. So I'll be here if anybody has questions. And I do want to say that I'm really excited to be working with the CERP team, because this is a really meaningful leap in the right direction to make more valuable understanding and interpretation of what's been going on across the size REU programs, and to give you a nice portrait of how you fit into that picture. So they really have the capacity to do advancing this research and your own understanding of how your program is working.
We'd love to hear from other folks, and this can be from measurement that you have done or from your observations as well, just being part of the REU site experience. So how are your students different after participating in an REU?
I can mention few words about on the student side. This is our third round of the REU program. This is Dr. Tabrizi from East Carolina University. And so what we can call it probably a success is on the student side, based on two measures. One is those they eventually went to graduate program. The numbers have been very strong. And those participated on publications we have had on the two rounds of 3 years each, I think we had above 27, 28 publications, often with REU students as the principal author on the papers. So these were really significant for us to see students are showing interest in graduate program. But more than that, what I really put a lot of emphasis on to let them know that one of the main purpose of REU programming, at least in my opinion, is to build in them a self-reliance. And that is really fundamental for research. How can we come and measure this is going to be a bit of a challenge. What can we measure on to see that students are asking less questions and discovering their answers themselves? So this is not done yet. So this is something that maybe can be, you guys can help eventually. But biggest challenge we have had from what I have observed is the recruiting the faculty mentors, not having any compensation for their participation. We've often tried to raise some supplemental support from other sources. And so that really has been probably the biggest challenge, is how to bring people in to work for no money. So that's my few words.
Great, thank you, Dr. Tabrizi. I'd like to recognize that self-reliance as something that we will be looking into further as an outcome that we can measure, and also appreciate your input on the recruiting faculty mentors.
If I can,
Sorry. This is about the evaluation a couple of years after they left. So we have a problem attracting a lot of people to respond to that. So I would like to see your response rate, say 1 or 2 years after they left, and how do you incentivize them to respond to that? We do our own survey and evaluation. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm hearing a couple of different aspects of measurement challenges, which is definitely something we're going to cover. Does anyone want to offer anything else before we move on about changes that you're seeing in students, or even your graduate level mentors or advisors from the experiences? And if we want to talk about who's benefiting more in your eyes, either from things that you've measured or things from you've observed, we can talk about that as well. Otherwise, we'll move on to some of those challenges that we're discussing.
If I may, hi, my name is Lazarus Gals. I'm from Rutgers. I'm the PI for the DIMAX REU, which has been running since '93. One empirical observation that I have made, and we're talking with most of the students, when they come in, I think that mainly they try to enhance their CV. They just want, to get a publication out of it or something like that. But you see, while talking to them during the program, that gradually they change into just developing the mindset of doing research. They realize how hard it is, or how, but that most of the time you will not be making progress, but at the end, you can just make some meaningful contribution. There may be a breakthrough. So and then they get, I think that even though they come for, I would say, not so noble reasons, perhaps selfish reasons, just, to have something more to say in my application for grad school, and then they get their first experience as real graduate students. So I think that this is very valuable. In my mind, that's the main contribution of our REUs to our students. Graduate students, graduate advisors, also, it's typically the first time that they get to see the other side, even though, how it is to advise, what it takes, to explain a new research program to someone. And as for faculty advisors, I would say it's mostly voluntary work that they don't have a real incentive, but most of them understand, the importance of getting the other graduate students working early with them and the benefits, of helping students. So that's my 5 cents for this question. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else like to share? Okay. Okay, so if we would like to move on, the next item that we would appreciate your feedback on is related to your use of the evaluation toolkit or whatever evaluation process you have been using. Are there any measurement challenges or concerns you have that affect your ability to document your size REU outcomes? Some of these have been touched on previously. Some, items, measurement like self-reliance is something that is lacking. And the ability to track students over the long term has been a challenge. So would you like to share any other concerns or challenges that you've been facing that we should know about?
This is Lisa Mas again with University of Central Florida. So yes, I completely agree with, I'm sure probably everyone on the call, but certainly the PI who said that tracking students over time. Survey is easy, it's just getting them to respond. I think, and Audrey, if you can correct me, she did create an alumni or follow-up survey, but the questions they were so long, there's just no way the students would do it. I tried to keep mine like 10 questions around there, something they can do literally in 3 to 5 minutes. Because the longer I make it, the worse my response gets. So that's something. Of course, there are lots of things I want to ask them, but I have to think about just what 10 things do I really need to know, 10 or less. And so that's been more or less working. And then if no one responds, then the usual fallback, Google LinkedIn, their LinkedIn profiles.
Christy, if I may jump in here for a moment just to speak to response rates. So that's something that at CERP we are familiar with, especially with our Data Buddy survey where we track students over time. So we do have attrition over time with that survey in the longitudinal component, but whenever we do follow-ups for program evaluation, we typically have about a 20% response rate. In general, that's not that bad, even though it seems kind of small. So once for the follow-ups that we intend to do, we'll have student email addresses and their permission to follow up with them, which will integrate into the surveys that we send for the program evaluation. So as long as they volunteered their information to us and to participate in the follow-up surveys, we'll be able to send them plenty of reminders. And at CERP, we're not afraid to send reminders to students, but then we'll also have an incentive for them to complete the survey. I realize sometimes incentives, especially raffle drawings, can be hit or miss in terms of whether students value those or not, but we will have I guess plenty to go around in terms of raffle. There'll be more opportunities than just say one gift card. I don't remember the specifics at the moment, but I know we have at least between 20 to 50 gift cards that people will be able to win, and it could be more than that. So we have the funds to incentivize students as best as we can. And there's also an incentive for the program evaluation piece during the summer. So there's several different opportunities for them to have some sort of incentive alongside the reminders that we will certainly be sending them to try to get some good response rates. So I just wanted to throw that in there, and happy to pass it back off to you, Christy.
Another challenge I wanted to mention is, so a lot of times these students, they're giving us their university email, and after they leave, they don't check it. So it's better to try and get a preferred email, which is when they're personal. But something I've seen that just recently also is, I've actually had a couple of students, so like I'm the program evaluator, so I'm sort of arm's length from the program. So if they don't remember my name, don't remember me because they don't really know me, I'm not really that involved day to day. Then I've actually gotten a couple students saying like, is this really from UCF? Because all that spam and don't click on links. So I don't know if anyone else has been seeing that, but I have to say, yes, it's really okay. This one really came from UCF. And yes, you're absolutely right, not to click on just anything that you get from anyone. So
I can jump in there. And you've got a couple program evaluators on here. I'm Bonnie Swan. I'm also from UCF. UCF is very big. We have a lot of REUs. I evaluate actually 3. This is a SICE REU. And I really like the idea of PIs following up with the students versus the evaluator, because we don't have that relationship with them. And if NSF were to follow up with them, I don't know how that would, if that would be better or worse, but I think a really good solid PI would also be sending them information. So it's a win-win relationship where they're regularly getting information about jobs and things that are going on in the field. If they could just include them on their regular email with their other graduate students or whatever, that would be great. We use almost all of these measures that you have listed here already for pre-post, and it's nice that even small numbers of students, and I also use Audrey's, although I've gone back to the full scale and sort of done my own reliability analysis depending on the type of REU. So if you're doing other types of REU, you might want to think about using the full scale and redoing the reliability, because it differs slightly from group to group and certainly program to program within the REU. I like the idea of continuing doing research and getting feedback from mentors. So we do some surveys with mentors, both graduate and faculty mentors, because we feel like, again, it needs to be a win-win for them, and we like to get feedback from them. I'm interested just for 2 questions. NSF is great that they're moving toward a wider evaluation of all the sites, because certainly there's a lot of students. I'm wondering if, because this will be repetitive to do the same thing at the local level versus the national level, the same instruments, the students have to take too many surveys. Do you feel like maybe and there isn't a lot of money for evaluation, by the way, we volunteer a lot of time. Do you see us moving more toward just the national evaluation, maybe the local evaluator or member of the project team sort of helping do some other things like focus groups or smaller, versus us? You can't just keep survey all the students. That's crazy. And we're certainly open to whatever's best for the students, all of us, I know. Just curious where we're going in the future. Sorry I talked so long.
Christy, is it okay if I take this question first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so you had a lot of different things going on in your comment. I really appreciate both the feedback and what you've been seeing and then what you're hoping to see. I think one of the comments that you were talking about with the recruitment, and I agree that it will hope to rely on PIs as much as you're willing to encourage students to take our surveys. For any of our program evaluations that we do, this is usually a huge help in getting response rates. And to what you were saying about NSF being able to encourage, that's, I think, one of the reasons why they wanted to contract the work for evaluation, because that's the only way that they can also encourage people to get involved in the evaluation. Otherwise, it's up to the PIs, and they can't do that. So with the contract, we're contracted to act on behalf of NSF. So I think that helps, and one of the reasons why they moved in this direction. So I'm trying to think about, as I was speaking, I lost track of the last question that you had. Okay, about the direction of the evaluation. So right now, the working with us for evaluation is not going to be required. it's strongly encouraged, but NSF cannot require you to work with us. If you do work with us, then that money does not have to, you don't have to budget for evaluation. So we have the funds from NSF to do the work. So that's how we're getting funded to do the work. So you don't have to budget to work with us. So I think the end goal, the hope would be to move to the more national scale or the CERP way of doing the evaluation so that we're not doing repeated work. I can't speak for any future solicitations that NSF would have in terms of working with us, but at the moment it's not required. So if you want to work with CERP for the more impact and feedback of your program and that pre-post perspective, but then you still want to work with an evaluator to do focus groups, then that's something you absolutely can use your evaluation funds to do. And that was something that got brought up at the PI meeting, that people were interested in having some qualitative analysis done for their evaluation, and where we don't provide that, you are free to work with whoever you would like to work with to have additional data collection and understanding. But I hear the point of we don't want to over survey people. So it's something that will be your decision, as a PI or who to decide how you want to manage that. But CERP will be a resource for you. And again, you don't have to budget to work with us. If you want to use those funds to do additional work, then you can do that. So I hope that answers your questions and perspectives, Bonnie. And I know there are a few other people online, so I'll pass that
Thank you.
over to Christy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I saw Lazarus, you wanted to raise a point.
Hi, this is Annie from Salisbury University. How are you? And so I just share my experience for our site. So we in the past 8 years, we work with Andrew and about the evaluation. And I think we also have we hire the budget addition, like the external evaluator. So she will analyze the data Andrew give us. Also, she will do the exit program, like the face-to-face, like the one-to-one, like the exit program. So, like our site, originally we only have 8 people. Now we have 10 people. So even 10 people, the data sometimes, because the small size, sometimes the analysis is based on what the evaluator told me, not so can speak for our program. So that have the one-to-one individual. So that also students may feel more comfortable, or sometimes talk to people instead of do over survey, or the service take the 20 or 30 minutes. So yeah. So this is just my experience. So have some individual, the person, external program person, and talk to check with the students regularly at the end, and have ask them about their experience.
Thank you. Heather, it looks like there's a number of questions that kind of go back to plans for next year's implementation. So do you want to go back to those and address those as well? They're in the chat.
How about you go ahead and address the other comments that are here, and I'm going to read through those. I haven't looked at the questions yet. Okay, so from Lazarus, I see your question about if we want to use CERP as an external evaluator, do we need to contact you and have some sort of agreement before we submit an REU proposal? Lazarus, is that for if you're submitting a proposal for a new, to renew your REU site?
Yes, we are up for renewal this August, for example, so I'm going to submit a proposal now. Can you just mention that CERP will be doing the external evaluation without budgeting anything? And do we need to, I guess you should be aware of that, right? Or
So you can put in your proposal that you'll work with CERP. I would need to confirm with Becky Sherman at NSF about what you would need to put in the proposal. And because I'm not sure of the logistics between where we're already contracted to do it, if it's necessary for you to put it there or not, because the communication for us will happen anyways, based on what's in the proposal versus not, in terms of us reaching out and saying you want to work with us this summer. So I'll follow up with you about that once I get the specific details from Becky on the NSF side, just to make sure that I don't advise incorrectly. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, and then looks like from Katie, we have a CERP look at the REU site goals or types of institutions to do between site comparison. Sites sometimes have different goals, resources available. So this is a great question. This is back to what I was mentioning with, we'll ask you some questions about your REU site before the summer so that we can cull an appropriate comparison group, because we recognize that there are different goals, different resources, different sizes there. So we'll try to get that information from you beforehand so that we know in advance how the comparison groups would work. But we're not going to compare REU site A to REU site B to REU site C. It's going to be your REU sites, REU site A to, REU sites B through Z, or, a subset of that. So the comparison group will be at the aggregate level. So we're not comparing individual REUs to each other. And we won't be doing that for you or for NSF. NSF will still be having an aggregate level of understanding because the goal is to not pit REU sites against one another at that individual level. We just want to know at a high level what we see. If one thing I mentioned is if we're not able to get the information from you or make a clear cut understanding of what the comparison groups will be, we can do other types of ways to get a comparison group. And if we have to resort to other measures that such as institution type, if we want to compare REU sites that are at PhD granting institutions to other REUs at similar PhD institutions, then we'll run that by you just to make sure that that seems fair. But we have other ways to create comparison groups if we don't have something that makes sense that's specific to the REU site goals and resources.
Can I add something to that as well? I think also as part of this facilitated conversation, hearing from you about what you think is important in terms of those site comparisons is really great. So if you want to spend some time talking about that now, or help us by sharing that in the agenda notes, that would be helpful for us so that we are making sure that we consider all of the factors we should be when we decide how to make those site comparisons.
I had one other follow-up. So we're in our first renewals. We're in our 7th year, and a lot of my first cohort is like, how often are you every summer you're going to send me an alumni email? I'm like, yes, because I miss you. but they're like, how long? Like some of them are like, the ones in academia are super excited. They're like, yay, I finished my PhD and I'm on the market. But some of them who went into industry are less excited. They're like, I'm still here. Why are you reminding me this? So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And at the moment we have plans for at least one follow-up, maybe 2 follow-ups, but I absolutely hear your point, because we see that with data buddies, because we joke that once they agree to be followed up with, we just never let them go. But that's because we want to track their educational and career trajectory over time, and which is why we opened up the survey to collect data from people who graduated. But we hear that point. We appreciate it.
Related to that, I also have a rather unorthodox point of view on this aspect, that there is no point in surveying REU students after 2 or 3 years. All that we can hope for these 2 months that are with us, to give them, an idea of what graduate school is, how, stay in the field or whatever. But after 5 years, after they have gone through graduate school, or after they have worked for 5 years in Google or in any other industry, do they have so many other experiences much closely related to their career that REU is going to be minor, or I would say, even though we want to feel that that was the first step, it's still just the first step. I don't think that it makes sense to try to find the impact of REU after 5 years. The main impact is to put them in the right path, or perhaps in a path that is valuable to them, graduate school, whatever industry, whatever they want to do, and then just make sure that we impacted them in a proper way. But other than that, long-term surveys for 2 months of their life, I don't think it makes much sense.
Agreed. I think it's important to make sure that your evaluation is focused on your main information needs and not to test the goodwill of folks to continue to complete evaluation work on an ongoing basis. Let's see, I want to do a time check real quick. We're at 10:53. And so Heather, do you want to do a wrap up after, well, let me see. So we had another question that we wanted to get to very quickly, which is just to determine whether there are other things about size REU sites that our evaluation can address. And this has sort of been coming out as we've been discussing, but if there's anything else you'd like to share with us about additional information needs that you have, additional student subgroups that you want us to focus on, any holes in your current data collection efforts, we'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
One thing I would love to know, so I see a big part of this is also helping our mentors improve our mentoring processes. So I would love to get, and I understand there's positive and minuses, but I would love to get some sort of data from like the first week survey. So Audrey's been sharing that with us so that when I do meet with the mentors on week 2, I can say, this is our cohort, here are their concerns, this is what they're worried about, and we can work together to address these concerns. And likewise, like we run a mid REU site survey that one of our previous evaluators created, so that when I meet with the mentors on week 5, we have 8-week REU, I can say, okay, here's what we're doing well, and here's where we need to improve. And just getting that data back quickly so that we can integrate into our own mentor training program, I think would be super beneficial and helpful.
Okay, more about the mentors and how they can better serve the students.
Right, like getting data from our students so that we can report back to the mentors.
Yeah, that cycle of information and improvement. Great. Anything else that folks want to share? Okay, well, then I'm going to turn it back to you, Heather, to do some wrap up and a review of next steps.
Yeah, thanks. So this time for the wrap up was mainly to give you an opportunity if there were any final questions that say weren't specific to the discussion that we had. I've tried to answer some things that were in the chat. You can feel free to put them there. You can also put them in the agenda. So the agenda that we have will be available well after this call. So if you want to go in there and insert thoughts that you have, you can feel free to go in and do that. You can also email us. I'm going to put in the email to the chat, but it's also in the agenda. So it's just serpreu@cra.org. And this is the email address that we'll be using to communicate with you as we move forward in the process. Right now, we are creating the surveys and the measures. We'll be using your feedback for those, and the focus of those that creation will be on these impact measures that we've discussed. Cecilia had asked about site-specific questions, and those we will absolutely consider. That'll be more for when we get closer to the spring and prior to the REU, that we'll just work with your specific site to make sure we integrate things that you would want to know that's very specific to your site and couldn't be aggregated across. So in the meantime, we'll just be working with federal regulations to make sure we can do this work and that we are following all legal implications like the Paperwork Reduction Act and all the legalese that I'm sure you don't care about too much, but we have to care about. And I just assume by the fall, we'll have a good idea for any next steps. And we'll, like I said, we'll reach out to you over email. And if you have feedback as we move forward, please send it to us anytime throughout the process. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, we recorded this session. So if you had to join late or, you know, there are things that you would want to revisit, we'll send you that recording. We'll make sure that the transcripts are included alongside the recording. And we'll also email it out to the PIs who couldn't join us today. Are there any things that we've missed that you want to bring up before we let everyone go? Okay, well, make sure to email us if anything does come up. Please use the agenda. Otherwise, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us. And we hope this was a good opportunity to understand more about what the plans are and give you an opportunity to express how you view the process should look moving forward. So thanks everyone for joining us. You'll hear from us sometime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.